All right, good afternoon once again, and welcome to Student Homelessness and what Indiana communities can do about it. My name is Rod Motz. I am the Director of State Policy for an organization called SchoolHouse Connection. For those of you who may not be familiar with our organization, SchoolHouse Connection is a national nonprofit. We are based in DC. I work remotely from Michigan, so I'm also a Midwesterner. And we provide strategic advocacy and practical assistance in partnership with schools, early childhood programs, K through 12 education and higher education. We work along with service providers, community organizations, and family and youth who've been impacted by homelessness to figure out ways that we can address some of the challenges confronting them and that contribute to their homelessness. Schoolhouse Connection has a wealth of resources available on our website. I encourage you all to go to schoolhouseconnection.org and check it out. We have information on our federal and our state policy advocacy. I'm going to talk about some of that during the course of the webinar tonight. We have a lot of resources specifically for McKinney-Vento liaisons and other folks who work with youth experiencing homelessness, including a Q&A section, which I encourage you to check out to learn more about ways in which service providers address some of the challenges that they face in their daily working lives. We have a number of webinars that have been archived that include trainings as well as other issue-related information. And you will be able to find a copy of this webinar on our website too, in our state policy fellow, I'm sorry, on our state policy page in the policy fellows section. You can also find more information on our youth leadership and scholarship program, which is a wonderful initiative through which we provide college scholarships to folks entering higher education, and we also support them as they navigate their way through. We are here tonight to talk about the work of our policy fellows. Our policy fellows initiative is one that my state policy team oversees, and it's a great effort that we started a couple of years ago to identify stakeholders who are service providers or youth leaders who are interested in addressing youth homelessness in their respective areas and want to learn how to be effective advocates. We have identified cohorts based on the importance of their congressional districts to the federal level work that we do. And who those U.S. senators and U.S. reps are and the committees that they sit on, and where strategically those individuals and the positions they hold will help us advance legislation. And we'll talk about some of the priorities that we've had our fellows work on. But they are a wonderful group of people who learn more about what it takes to influence federal level legislation and ways to effectively engage their Congress people. We have had two cohorts. Our second cohort represents 14 policy fellows in 7 states who've visited their Congress people and advocated for some really great federal initiatives aimed at addressing youth homelessness. And I'll allow our Indiana fellow to make an introduction now.
Thank you, Rod. Excuse me. Thank you, Rod. My name is Azraet Hesse. My IU colleagues and attendants would know that, but for anybody watching this in the future, I really appreciate the views and for checking out this information. My name is Azraet Hesse. As I said, I'm a PhD student at Indiana University in the Criminal Justice Department. I particularly research mental health interventions in policing right now, but a PhD is a long ride, so who knows what we'll get up to by the end of it. Additionally, I was also a Schoolhouse Connection Scholar in 2018 and got a chance to also be a youth leader for 2 cohorts, I believe 2 summers ago. It was a wonderful experience and I really enjoyed working with Schoolhouse Connection. And so when they reached out to me about this policy fellow opportunity, of course, I wanted to get into it. So let's talk about it.
All right, I'm going to take one step back. So our agenda for the webinar will include, in addition to our welcome, some information about student homelessness, what it looks like and how it affects young people. Then we'll talk about the issues that we've been advocating for, and then the things that you all can do to help. So we know there are about 1.2 million people who've been identified as students experiencing homelessness in the K through 12 system across the US. And although that is a sizable figure that you're looking at right now, we know that it's much larger because of the challenges related to identifying and communicating with students experiencing homelessness. Homelessness has many faces, and that's one of the reasons that the effort to identify and serve students is so difficult. It could include staying in a motel or a hotel, staying with other people following an eviction, staying in a domestic violence shelter or other type of shelter, or rotating from house to house, the phenomenon known as couch surfing, or living doubled up or tripled up.
This information that I'm about to go over can be found on the data profiles on Schoolhouse Connection's website. It covers the 2020 to 2021 school year. And I went through and pulled specifically Indiana as well as Monroe County data for this. In the parentheses are the percentages. Our total number of youth experiencing homelessness, that 15,000 number, that is the 1.5% is percentage of all students in K through 12 that have been identified, whereas the percentages for the other slides are the percentages of students that have been identified as experiencing homelessness. The general rate is, I believe, more. Can we go down to the county slide, please? I wanted to compare these two because our county here, where Indiana University resides, happens to be higher overall in the percentages we found of students experiencing homelessness. Yet I wanted to point out that in that 2020-2021 school year, there were no identified unsheltered students, nor were there any identified unaccompanied youth. So youth who are on their own without a guardian or parental figure. And when originally researching for this project and realizing those statistics, it made me very, very interested in getting to know the Monroe County side of things, because statistically, it makes no sense that there would be no unsheltered youth and no unaccompanied youth in our county. And I've currently been trying to get a hold of the one McKinney-Vento liaison for the school district here in town. And that's super common for there just to be one person who kind of is supposed to handle all of this work. And she's been quite busy, unsurprisingly. And so it's been tough to get a hold of her. And so these were some of the issues that I really wanted to bring to the attention of our District 9 representative, Congresswoman Houchin. It's just making sure that we have better follow through for students with these services, making sure we are providing as much information as possible, making sure we understand the definitions of these different types of homelessness just was so important. And if you look at the statistics, it seems very important to our county specifically. If we're not identifying these students, that means it's a failure of the systems that we already have, and potentially a failure of the way we identify people, the way we define certain living situations.
Thank you. And I began the presentation talking about that 1.2 million figure and the fact that we know it's an undercount, and the figures that the data set includes for unaccompanied youth is greatly undercounted because it only represents those 11th and 12th graders identified through FAFSA data. And the fact that there are zero unsheltered here is just not an accurate representation of what that population looks like, to Azaret's point. So homelessness impacts education, and one of the things that we advocate for here at Schoolhouse is the attainment of education, because we know it's the single greatest factor when it comes to students avoiding homelessness as adults. So 42% of students who experience homelessness drop out, and 60% say it's hard to stay in school as a result of all those things that contribute to homelessness and the disruptions that manifest themselves when it comes to education. In fact, homelessness is associated with an 87% likelihood of dropping out of school, and all those things that contribute to it, like chronic absenteeism and discipline that's meted out disproportionately to those students who are already struggling. And because of that, you see achievement gaps between those students and low-income students who are suffering similar challenges when it comes to education. And that gap between those two populations and their peers without similar challenges never really narrows over time and usually gets worse. Lack of a high school diploma or GED, as you see here, as I referenced earlier, is the single greatest risk factor for young adult homelessness. It makes that possibility 346% more likely, in fact. And that has negative effects later on when it comes to trying to attain a job that's actually going to pay a living wage as a result of not having a diploma or GED. It, really means that folks are going to end up underemployed or unemployed. So McKinney-Vento is an important strategy to overcoming youth homelessness. If you're not familiar with McKinney-Vento liaisons that Azaret referenced earlier, the McKinney-Vento Act mandates the designation of liaisons in K through 12 institutions so that schools have a professional who can help students experiencing homelessness address all those barriers that comes along with not being stably housed and having their lives disrupted, including challenges with staying in their school of origin if they move during a school year, or getting access to transportation if they move and want to go to a school that's far away as a result of that relocation. Getting enrolled into a school when they have to leave one and move into another as a result of losing their housing, and all those issues that come along with it that could prevent them from graduating, like the accumulation of credits. And then some of those real barriers to some of the supportive things they need and the extracurricular activities. So McKinney-Vento liaisons play a critical role in being able to identify those students who are homeless and then begin to address a lot of these challenges that they face as a result.
So we're going to get into a little bit more of what makes you eligible to receive McKinney-Vento services. Children and youth who lack fixed, regular, adequate nighttime residence. And so this includes housing, sharing houses with people and often losing them, having to jump between different relatives or friends. And we saw the 77% of identified McKinney-Vento students from that school year that we've been referencing. And also extended motel, hotel, trailer park stays that are not a consistent living residence, something that is like a pay by week, pay by month. Like a lot of those situations are not considered adequate living accommodations and will also get you qualified for those services. A few more transitional shelters. The Rise in Bloomington through the Middleway House is an example of one of those types of transitional shelters. 11% of McKinney-Vento students fall into that category, living in a public space, something that's not regularly used, and then living in cars, parks, abandoned buildings. All of those substandard living situations are going to qualify you for McKinney-Vento services. We have, by the way, just for these statistics, there are like references on the slides that will be provided with all the record so that you can hop back to anything you need to see.
And I'll pause for a moment for any questions. And you can feel free also to use the Q&A feature to submit questions or drop questions in the chat as we go along. I'll also pause again once we go through our federal priorities, but don't hesitate to let us know. Following the presentation, everyone who registered will get a copy of the PowerPoint, as Azarette alluded to, as well as a recording. So you can feel free to check it out later, and we will encourage you to share it with others as well. So I mentioned the work of our fellows in congressional engagement, and we really focused on 3 priorities for this session. Our initial cohort had a similar mission, and we found that it was really effective having our policy fellows focus on the same priorities and collaborate amongst themselves to engage their Congress members in their respective states. Azarette was our lone Indiana fellow and did a wonderful job in helping us make the case. So the 3 things we focused on were flexible funding to help students experiencing homelessness. We found that the funds provided through the American Rescue Plan in 2021 allowed districts across the country to do some innovative things as a result of having extra money and the flexibility to use it in ways that allowed them to address the unique needs in their respective communities. So we're advocating for continued additional funding and that flexibility that folks need to use it as they see fit. We're also focusing on how we might address some of the barriers to higher education for homeless youth and youth formerly in the foster care system, and ways in which we can better assist families meeting the critical needs of children and youth experiencing homelessness. And we'll talk about each of these in a little more depth. As it relates to funding, so in 2021, that pot of money I was referring to that came through the American Rescue Plan was specifically for homeless children and youth, and that represented $800 million, which did a lot of great things. And there are states that, in addition to funding some of the creative, innovative programs and initiatives designed to address homelessness, still have some money to spend. And we are now encouraging them to put that money to good use to help us continue to make the case for its impact and the need to make sure that that funding is there for years to come. I encouraged you all to visit our website earlier, and in addition to all those resources I pointed out, we also have been highlighting the ways in which school districts are using these funds creatively to help their students. And I think those examples that we highlight will really help you understand both the benefits of having more money to use as people need to in their communities, but also the many ways in which students need to be better supported and cannot be supported without that additional money.
During my congressional visits, excuse me, we specifically focused in on a bill that's been nicknamed HESHFI, the Higher Education Access and Success for Homeless and Foster Youth Act. And this is going to create a position very similar to a McKinney-Vento liaison, except at the higher education level, at the collegiate level. And with this would come a more warm handoff to try to facilitate education success, make sure we have people graduating. Along with this, it's going to involve better housing plans for specifically the winter times, the transitional times when students are often kicked out of their dormitories. I had that particular experience when I was a freshman, and I was told I would have to pay quite a bit of money to stay there for the 3-4 week break. And so this would hopefully be changed. And it's also going to provide extra tuition opportunities or reduce tuition opportunities or funding opportunities so that students can get into in-state public institutions. And there are quite a few provisions. I don't particularly want to get too into it, but I would highly recommend checking it out and seeing for yourself all the provisions it provides.
Yeah, and you'll get this presentation and be able to learn more about what HESFI does. I'll point out that we are working on a reintroduction of a bill that was last introduced in the 2022 session. It was HR 6666, which you can look up. I'm going to go over how to do all that at the end of the presentation. But we are confident we will be able to get reintroduction of this in the next 2 or 3 months. But we'll certainly be counting on our friends and allies to help us make that possible by talking to their elected officials and advocating for it.
Additionally, another bill that I particularly am fond of supporting is one that would help align some of the definitions of homelessness between different departments. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, their definition of homelessness does not align with the Department of Education. I've been advocating for reform similar to this one since I think 2019 was the first time I went and talked to people about this and how it was an issue. But that means that many students that qualify for help in the Department of Education are not going to qualify for help when it comes to housing. And so bringing those into alignment and also making sure we're properly identifying people would be very good, because we don't even know what we need provisions for until we have correct readings on what's going on.
And I'll just add to that. So the Homeless Children and Youth Act, HCYA is what we refer to it as, has been introduced. It's HR 5221, as you see here. We are working to try to get it passed, and our ask through our fellows to their Congress people has been to support the bill and to encourage other Congress members to sign on. There are a total of 15 co-sponsors currently, and we're looking to add to that. We did see additional Congress people sign on after our policy fellows made the ask. And that's been consistent through our Policy Fellows initiative. So we saw the same thing with the first cohort of Policy Fellows, and just want to extend a shout out to them for the work that they do, because it does make a difference. And that's helped by having people like Azarette with lived experience, as well as some of our stakeholders who have professional experience working with the youth that we're trying to help through this policy reform. So we are going through our series of community engagement webinars during this time, because December and January is a great time to advocate for these reforms with Congress folks who are going to be back home and in district and available to you all. The importance of trying to get as many Congress folks from both sides of the aisle is evident here in the figures you see about the composition of the House and Senate. You see the margins are very narrow. Republicans have a slim margin in the House, and the Democrats a slim margin in the Senate. You see there are 3 independents identified there. They typically caucus with the Democrats, which give the Democrats a slight majority in the Senate. So we really need people, from both sides of the aisle to step up and sign on. All 3 of these priorities are bipartisan issues. Our HR 5221 bill that has been introduced includes sponsors from both sides of the aisle, and we are expecting a similar bipartisan effort for the reintroduction of HESFI as well.
So just a little bit more wrapping, I believe. Yeah, wrapping up some of this work that I was doing as a policy fellow. Um, we were going in and we were asking them to support that flexible funding that's going to allow individual districts to figure out what do they need, along with this, supporting those reforms towards the HESFI, that creating a McKinney-Vento liaison in the higher education world for everybody. And along with this, supporting the passage of that Homeless and Children Youth Act. I also want to say, like, I've tried advocating these things in many different ways, and it was very cool to have some coaching in order to have more of a one-on-one experience with some of the congressional staffers, and some of and being able to go through this process with support and be able to book out the next time we want to talk about these things, and being able to have email exchanges about these topics, and it feeling like an actual active conversation with myself and my representatives was a really cool experience. I've done talks in a couple of different ways, and I know the Indiana Transitions Conference that happens every single year in Indianapolis. It either just happened or it's going to happen soon. They work very hard on creating a single point of contact or a McKinney-Vento liaison style person in these worlds of higher education, and being able to support that in a different way, being able to potentially support that in a more systematic way is very exciting.
Yeah, and you did a great job. I was looking forward to you talking about your experience and actually engaging your Congress member. So for the folks who may be interested in potentially participating in the Policy Fellows Initiative or helping us in advocacy in whatever capacity they are interested in getting involved with. Can you talk a little bit more about your experience in actually engaging your congressperson? For example, were there things about your conversation with the congressional office that may have surprised you?
I with my meeting with Todd Young staffer, it was kind of what you would expect. somebody who's never heard of a McKinney-Vento liaison needed a little bit more information just on some of the vocabulary in order to understand exactly what we were talking about. But overall, it was they were positive and they were very willing to listen to what we had to say as well as relay information back. But quite strikingly, the meeting with Houchin staffer was different in that we happened to run into an individual who, while having a conversation about these definitions, asked, is that the service that buses students in? Is that the bus service or the special ride service if you live away? And we said yes. And this individual said, oh, I think I was a McKinney-Vento kid. I think I was a McKinney-Vento kid. And what was so striking about that was that it was an individual with lived experience who was a staffer for my District 9 here in Indiana. That was so cool, so wildly cool to, as another person with lived experience, to understand the obstacles that need to be overcome. Amazing, awesome. But with that too, this individual didn't even have the words to place what their experience was, what they were labeled as, McKinney-Vento kid. And that was also interesting to me because this was somebody who undoubtedly had a significant experience. It's not like they just forgot about this experience, but they didn't have the words to talk about it. And I think that tells you how important it is to have these conversations to help people understand these definitions. Because gosh, it was so cool.
That had to be a pleasant surprise, I imagine.
It was, and it was also a pleasant surprise to hear that Houchin was very warm to these topics and that she had experience with social service work prior to her role now. And it was very interesting and it was exciting to sit down on this one-on-one and it go well.
Yeah, I was also pleased that you referenced one of the objectives in this exercise for me, and that's to make our policy fellows and in the work that I do with any volunteers better advocates for themselves and people around them on these issues and other issues in their community. And I hope we helped position you to do just that in Indiana.
I feel like I've definitely learned quite a bit along the way, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without the significant helping hand that the Policy Fellows program provided. So I'm happy.
As are we with you. All right. I'll pause one more time for questions. This is a quiet group. Must
Poor Jill and
mean we're hitting it out of the park.
Carrying the weight of the whole presentation.
We have, yeah, we've gone over quite a bit of information. So again, if you want to leave questions, you can. And there will be some information about reaching out to us in the email that'll go out following this, should you think of questions later and want to send them to us. So I mentioned being able to look up more on the bills, and you can do that at congress.gov. It's a great resource if you have not felt the need to be a policy wonk before. Congress.gov gives you an opportunity to access information on the bills that we talked about tonight, as well as a wealth of information regarding other legislation. It's a good place to go to find out who has supported the bills. You can find out, who your Congress member is if you don't know your U.S. rep or your U.S. senator. Um, and I encourage you to get to know those individuals and to get to know more about what it is that they are interested in. It's a good way to do that is checking them out on social media, particularly X and LinkedIn, where they tend to be very active. You can also find out more about our policy fellows work as well as our federal policy and our state policy, if you're interested in that as well, through our newsletter and on our federal policy and our state policy pages. And if you want to reach us directly, feel free to um, use the email addresses that we've included here. And once again, they will be included in the PowerPoint that you'll get after this.
I just wanted these to be on the slides for reference when it's sent out, because these are a few organizations, the volunteer pages and links to fill out training forms, as you will have to do in Middleway House, are there. But these are just some organizations that really support the homeless and hardship communities here in Monroe County, particularly. The community kitchen is a really awesome one. There's a lot of flexible volunteer opportunities. The Middle Way House, additionally, is an amazing program. The Rise, it does take quite a bit of training in order to become a volunteer there, but I can say from experience, it's very gratifying work. So if you want any information, the links are on the slides.
Thank you. And if you are interested in getting more involved in advocacy work, I encourage you to scan the QR code here or visit schoolhouseconnection.org, and you'll be able to search for our advocacy network link through which you could sign up to get training on how to reach out to your Congress member, how to set up meetings, how to conduct those meetings, how to report back and follow up with them to see whether or not the things that you're advocating for were ever acted on. We provide all those trainings and resources necessary to do the kind of congressional engagement that Azarette so skillfully completed. So with that said, I will check one more time. I do not see any questions. And that is the end of our presentation. We appreciate you joining us tonight. And when you do get the email, we encourage you to share that with other folks in Indiana who may be interested in learning more about youth homelessness or ways in which they might be better advocates for the youth in Indiana who are experiencing homelessness. Nazareth, I'll give you the last word.
I once again just want to say thank you to my IU colleagues who popped up for the live session, and I'm just very excited to kind of wrap this all up and be able to talk about it and share it. And I, again, really appreciate the opportunity to learn and grow as an advocate. Thanks.
All right. And I just want to say we could not have done it without you. So you made a difference, and we appreciate you every day. And to you all who joined us tonight, I just want to say thanks once more and enjoy the rest of your evening.